Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. A lot to talk about today. The All-Star Snubs. Some reserves got snubbed. Big Ben still wants back in Pittsburgh, but do the Steelers want him? All that stuff is coming up along with a great Malkin's Moments. This is going to be the most creative Malkin's Moments that I've ever had. Have an interactive part at the very end, so you're not going to want to miss it. This is a first on Morning Joe right here. But unfortunately, we do have to start with some really just devastating news in the golf world. Tiger Woods was involved in a major single car accident yesterday in palos-verdes, California. Now, fortunately, the LAPD Sheriff's Department said that he has fully underwent surgery. He is recovering well, but at the time of the crash, they had to bring out the ambulance and the paramedics. Initially, it was thought to believe that they needed to use the jaws of life apparatus to pry the vehicle open. Fortunately, that was not the case. They did not have to do that anymore. But again, now he suffered major leg injuries, 2 fractured legs, one of which was a compound fracture along with a shattered ankle suffered to Tiger Woods yesterday. And so he was in California. The backdrop is that he was in California for the Genesis Invitational at the Riviera Club in Palisades, which is a golf tournament that he hosts, an event that he hosts through his charitable foundation. And he was heading in that direction for a shoot, actually, with Drew Brees and Justin Herbert, when unfortunately this crash ensued early in the morning. And a lot of thoughts went through my mind as I was hearing and reacting to this news. Overall, I was extremely relieved and glad to hear that this was not fatal. I'm glad to hear that we did not lose another sports icon in an eerily similar and familiar fashion like we lost Kobe Bryant in that helicopter crash last January. So my first feelings were of relief because all this anxiety was now trickling down into another sports topic, right? And I think that this is one of those moments when it's important to take a step back and view things on a humanistic level and from a human element. We all know the past transgressions that Tiger Woods has been involved with, has committed. We don't need to go down that path again. But what was notable was that here you have an individual in Tiger Woods that was humbled to the nth degree. He literally hit rock bottom and now was on the path to recovery. It seemed like he had finally turned a corner, had turned a new leaf, written a new chapter in his book, was becoming a much more righteous individual and a better person, a great father to his kids. We've seen the numerous clips that he and his son Charlie have played together in father-son charitable golf tournaments. And so what was really devastating and really just sapped the energy yesterday was this is a perfect example of how fickle and cruel life is. And how quickly things can turn in just a matter of seconds. How unfair and how inhumane it can be. And I think that setting aside who Tiger was as a person, as a father, when you look at Tiger Woods in a vacuum as an athlete, as a golf player, this guy was and is an icon. He is revered throughout the world, not only for his golf accomplishments, not only for his accomplishments on the course, but how he trailblazed a new path. He opened doors for African-American golfers that would never have happened if it wasn't for his ascension, if it wasn't for his success. Again, this is a guy that turned pro at age 20 in 1996. He had probably the two greatest stretches of dominance in a sport that we've ever seen, and especially in golf. Between 1999 and 2002, he won 7 majors, and between 2005 and 2008, he won 6 majors. So this is a sports legend, a sports icon who completely revolutionized the game of golf and the viewing experience of golf. I want all of you to think about and be honest with yourselves, because I had to be honest with myself. If it was not for Tiger Woods, I wouldn't have ever watched golf. He is the sole gravitational pull to the sport. If you look at the TV ratings, the numbers when Tiger Woods is playing and was playing, especially during the height of his career, versus when he's not, during that lull between 2010 and 2017, there's an astronomical difference. People didn't care nearly as much about golf as they do now. And to see him reach that apex in 2019 at the Masters was one of the most legendary sports and most iconic sports moments that we'd seen perhaps in the past 2 decades in the 21st century. And so what makes this story so much more devastating is that if this is the last that we've seen of Tiger Woods as a golfer, and I sure hope it isn't, this would just be an inhumane ending to a fantastic career. Because we were deprived of Tiger Woods for 10 prime years. And finally, we're seeing this resurgence. He's a transformed individual. He's on this better path. And once again, there's another setback. There were talks about him potentially playing in the Masters this upcoming April. He was just on with Jim Nantz on a CBS broadcast a couple days ago, expressing optimism about coming back and returning for the Masters this upcoming season in 2021. And obviously, I'm thrilled that this was not fatal, and the LAPD and the Sheriff's Department said that it's a non-life-threatening injury that he sustained. That's all fantastic and very positive news. But it's just crushing to see a guy who has left such an indelible mark, not only on the sport of golf, but on sports, have to go out this way potentially. I am sending my thoughts and prayers to him and his family, wishing him a full and speedy recovery, because golf is not the same without Tiger Woods, and it never will be the same without him. So now that we have taken care of that, and not to mention, by the way, he was just seen golfing on Monday with Dwayne Wade and Jada Pinkett Smith, with different celebrities, having a good time, sharing tidbits and knowledge. And we were starting to see a more humane and relatable and approachable Tiger Woods that we had never seen, almost like towards the end of Kobe's career. He was starting to be much more expressive with the media. We were starting to see that with Tiger Woods, a much more humble Tiger Woods, which was actually a more personal Tiger Woods. And so we miss him, and we hope, and I hope, that he recovers well and quickly, because we miss him. So sending our thoughts and prayers. Okay. On to a different topic. So the NBA is so interesting. There's always these topics. And again, another head coaching carousel happens. The Minnesota Timberwolves just fired Ryan Saunders a couple days ago, but that's not what makes this noteworthy. They hired Chris-Finch to be the new head coach, a former assistant with the Timberwolves. But this isn't what makes this a topic of discussion. So Karl-Anthony Towns, the Timberwolves' best player, came out yesterday and said that he was in shock when he heard the news. In fact, he found out through the media after the Timberwolves lost to the New York Knicks, suffering their 4th straight defeat. And he said he apparently was in shock by the decision. So We've seen numerous players come out and voice their frustrations, voice their concerns, especially some more prominent players like Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, call into question why more African-American head coaches are not coaching in the NBA. Right now, there are only 7 black head coaches in the NBA. And so the Timberwolves' assistant, their very own assistant, David Vanderpool, is an assistant with the Minnesota Timberwolves, and CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard questioned why was he overlooked, right? And one of the things that I've always contended, and it's quite obvious, is NBA players are the most empowered players and stars in any sports league, in any sports team. Obviously, a sport like golf, tennis are individualistic sports. Everything is predicated on them. It's directly attributed to them and their success. But in the NBA, basketball players are way more empowered than players in any other sport, and specifically NBA stars. They wield the most power, and they carry significantly more clout than any other star in a sport. That includes, in my opinion, quarterbacks in the NFL. And so, given that that is kind of a maxim now, if you are the Minnesota Timberwolves, and just take the LA Clippers, for example, you look at Kawhi Leonard and the fact that the Clippers tried to, they signed him a couple summers ago, but they traded for Paul George. But Kawhi Leonard told them, hey, if you don't get Paul George, I'm not coming. And so the Clippers moved heaven and earth to trade for Paul George. They gave away Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, 5 first-round picks, 2 pick swaps to acquire Paul George. And so it shows that if you are a star, your opinion can have a profound impact on what your organization does. Because the one thing that NBA players are starting to understand and exploit now is the advantage they have with regard to the power dynamic between them and the front office. Because the smart front offices, the smart owners are acutely aware and recognize the power that the players have. And that if these teams want to retain these NBA stars in free agency, if they want to attract other stars, if they want to still be relevant and compete for NBA titles, they need to acquiesce to players' demands. That's the reality. Steve Nash, as talented as an NBA player that he was, regardless of his credentials and his accomplishments, he would not be the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets if Kevin Durant and Kyrie didn't sign off on that trade, on that hiring. Frank Vogel would not be the head coach of the Lakers if LeBron put a kibosh on that, rather. The Rockets wouldn't have went all out to try and pursue and trade for Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul, or Dwight Howard if James Harden didn't highly encourage them to do so. These things wouldn't happen. So there's a reason why stars in the NBA are consulted about everything, because the players recognize and the stars recognize their power, and the ownership understands, and the owners understand the clout that they carry. And so if you're the Timberwolves, it's not that hiring Chris-Finch was a bad hire. This is a guy who's obviously paid his dues. He's been a professional head coach for 24 years. He was a coach in Europe for over 10 years. He coached the D League at the time. The NBA G League was referred to back then as the D League. He's been an assistant coach on the Timberwolves' bench for over 10 years. So he's paid his dues. And I'm not saying he's not going to be a good coach, and he very well may be, and he very well may have a profound impact on Karl-Anthony Towns. But the fact that you didn't consult Karl-Anthony Towns beforehand is a major misstep, because here you have a guy in Karl-Anthony Towns. Now, say what you want about their record. I understand they have the worst record in the Western Conference right now, but Karl-Anthony Towns is a star, and he's the only semblance and vestige of a future that your organization has. And so even though you traded for D'Angelo Russell, which he's a nice piece, but he's overpaid, he's not enough to entice Karl-Anthony Towns to stay. So this was a major misstep by the organization. And again, it's not because Chris-Finch isn't going to be a good head coach. He could very well be a good head coach. But the fact that you didn't consult with Karl-Anthony Towns was the blunder that you made. Just look at the Houston Texans. Now, granted, I will admit it's not the same situation with Deshaun Watson because they consulted with Watson and then they deliberately and in a perverse manner went behind his back and lied to him. So I'm not claiming that the Timberwolves are doing that because they didn't even apparently go approach Karl-Anthony Towns about the hiring. But again, what this could end up coming back, to haunt the Timberwolves, because here you had to thank your lucky stars that you landed the number 1 overall pick a couple years ago. You were able to draft Karl-Anthony Towns. He's expressed interest in wanting to remain in Minnesota and stay with the Timberwolves. And if this organization wanted to increase their likelihood of retaining him in free agency, which is coming up in a couple seasons, they should have consulted with him. And this is what Karl-Anthony Towns said. As a man of color myself, you would love to see more coaches that resemble what me and you look like on the sidelines. But you've got to support the organization in everything you do and understand. I understand how everything is, but at the end of the day, the organization made the choice that they felt was best for this organization, and you've got to be professional in all of this. Now, this doesn't sound like someone to me who was fully on board with the decision. This tone doesn't ring true to me. This bottle of wine doesn't have notes of grape in it. This doesn't sound like someone that was consulted who knew about the entire process before hiring Chris-Finch. And I understand that Karl-Anthony Towns has expressed his desire to remain in Minnesota, and that's a positive. But this is a guy who Finch is now the 4th head coach for Minnesota since Karl-Anthony Towns was drafted in 2015 and 2016 in that season. That's the most in the NBA. So I understand he wants to stay there, but not the best look if you're the Minnesota Timberwolves. Okay, so this was a hot topic of discussion yesterday. Wow, if you were following Twitter, Twitter was blowing up. All NBA players, other athletes were commenting on the All-Star Snubs, and this is one of the funnest parts of my job and of following the NBA, is this moment right here, the All-Star moment, the All-Star reserves. And we know that when it comes to the starters, it's easy to decide because 50% is the fan vote, 25% is the players, 25% is the media. And usually they get that right. They get it right all the time. But the All-Star reserves are voted on by the coaches. So naturally, it's an ultra subjective decision that normally the coaches don't always get right. The starters, they get right. There's normally fairly unanimous and bilateral support. Although this year, many would argue that, and me included, that Damian Lillard should have been a starter over Luka Doncic, but whatever. It is what it is. But this is sometimes why we see coaches make egregious errors. And it's not that they always make erroneous decisions. It's not that they select guys who aren't deserving. And this is the part that I dislike, is I hate having to bash and disparage players that I feel and I deem are less deserving than others, because if you're an all-star, then you are deserving to make the all-star team. But there are guys that deserve to make it over others. And this is the common flaw in coaches selecting the reserves, or at least being the sole voter for the reserves. It's not that they always select an individual who was undeserving, because again, every individual is deserving. But sometimes the error comes in the fact that they don't select an individual that is more deserving. So let's take a look at the Western Conference. So I predicted 5 of the 7 All-Star reserves correctly. The two guys I got wrong, Devin Booker and DeMar DeRozan. Now, listen, I don't have too many qualms about DeMar DeRozan not making the All-Star game. I just thought because he's having to individually lead the San Antonio Spurs, and they're a 6 seed right now, I thought he should garner some consideration. I'm not going to provide much pushback. But those two guys were replaced by Chris Paul and Zion Williamson. Now, the reality is that Anthony Davis, who was selected as an All-Star like I projected, he will be replaced due to injury. And most likely he'll be replaced by Devin Booker, who in a similar fashion last season replaced Damian Lillard on the All-Star team due to injury. But the fact that Devin Booker was not selected to the All-Star team outright is utter asinine and is a major indictment against the coaches and a major, major blunder on their part. This is just unfair treatment. Devin Booker, listen, I understand that Chris Paul is the leader of this team. And the impact that he has had since his arrival in Phoenix is unprecedented. And we've seen that he's one of the best leaders in sports. Everywhere Chris Paul has gone, he's led his team to success. When he was a member of the New Orleans Hornets, they made the playoffs with Monty Williams. He was a fantastic leader and a point guard, again, at just 6 feet, the ultimate point guard and floor general. When he went to the Clippers, he led the Clippers to the first time to the postseason in numerous years, had great success there with Lob City, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, Randy Foye, right? Those teams. And then he goes to Houston and lifts Houston all the way to the precipice, the Western Conference Finals. OKC, a team that was supposed to plummet in the standings, that was supposed to be in a full rebuild, he carries them to the postseason. I understand that, and I understand that the impact he's had in Phoenix has been huge so far. But to say that he's having a better season for the Suns and is the sole reason behind their success more than Devin Booker is preposterous. I mean, Chris Paul's having a great season. He's having a good season. I shouldn't say great season, a good season. 16.5 points, 8.5 assists, 4.5 rebounds. He's a great player. I'm not denying that. But the guy that should be garnering more of the attention, more of the respect, and gaining more of the credit for the Phoenix Suns' success is Devin Booker. They're the 4th seed in the Western Conference, and he's averaging 25 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. This guy has been fantastic. And again, flying under the radar, and coaches are overlooking him. If you were to poll all 30 teams, how many of them do you think would trade for Devin Booker right now? For a starting 2 position, I would say at least 28. Maybe 2 teams feel like they already have their starting backcourt. Maybe the Clippers say they've got Paul George and Kawhi. They don't need Devin Booker. But at least 28 teams out of 30 in a heartbeat would trade for Devin Booker. And the fact that he's not there, again, and I love Zion Williamson. I had him as a borderline All-Star, kind of right on the precipice, probably the guy that I thought would replace Anthony Davis. If assuming Chris Paul wasn't initially announced the starter for Anthony Davis, I thought Chris Paul or Zion Williamson would be one of the two to replace him. So I'm glad that the coaches thought along the same lines as I did, but he should be garnering the lion's share of the success. And the fact that he's not is ridiculous to me. Now, on the Eastern Conference, Nikola Vucevic is the hot topic of discussion. I got 6 out of the 7 All-Star reserves correctly. Now, listen, I genuinely like Nikola Vucevic. In fact, I think that he's got no flaws in his game offensively whatsoever. He's got no flaws. And he is the prototypical center who can stretch the floor, shoot the 3, hit the mid-range, take you down to the post, hit a left hook shot, right hook shot. He's fantastic around the rim, and he's a pretty solid defender. And to his credit, he's having a career year in points per game, 24 points per game, 12 rebounds, and 3.5 assists. He's having a great season. But to claim that he should be an All-Star this year when the Magic have the fourth worst record in the Eastern Conference over a guy like DeMarcus Sabonis, who in my opinion should be a surefire All-Star this year, that's also ludicrous. And again, this is not a knock on Nikola Vucevic. I think he's a fantastic player. He has been an All-Star, so he's an All-Star caliber player. But if you're looking at the type of season he's having this year, he should not be an All-Star this year. That nod should go to DeMarcus Sabonis. And I know other people on Twitter have expressed interest in other guys potentially replacing him. DeMarcus Sabonis should be an All-Star. The fact that the Western Conference has at least one representative from every team in the top 5 seedings, and the Eastern Conference doesn't have a player featured from 2 of the top 5 teams in the Toronto Raptors and the Indiana Pacers, that's just insulting. And between the Raptors and the Pacers deserve to have someone there. And he should be DeMarcus Sabonis. This is a guy who's averaging career highs in points and assists per game, 21.5 points, 11.6 rebounds, and 6 assists for a guy shooting over 50%, nearly 40% from the three-point line. He's been an absolute tear, and the Pacers are the 4th best. They're the 4th best team in the Eastern Conference right now, and it's because of him. Now, granted, I understand he has a little bit more help than Nikola Vucevic. Malcolm Brogdon is nothing to sneeze at, and to me, he's, again, another one of these borderline precipice Eastern Conference All-Stars, along with Trae Young. But if you're just going to go the route of selecting guys with eye-popping numbers on bad teams, you've already done that with 3 players. You already picked Bradley Beal, who's a starter, who's having eye-popping numbers. Zach LaVine, thank God he was selected into the All-Star game. The Bulls are the 9th seed, so they're not even a playoff team, but he has been balling for 29, 5, and 5 this year, so I'm glad he got in. But again, if you're just trying to select guys with eye-popping numbers that are on losing teams, then just pick Trae Young. Then just take Trae Young. He's averaging 27 points, 9.5 assists. Just take Trae Young. So that doesn't really make sense to me. And again, no disrespect, no knock to Nikola Vucevic. Again, this is not meant to be an attack at him. He is a really good player, but this particular year, the Orlando Magic are not doing well, and his numbers aren't eye-popping enough to me where he just screams all-star over some of these other guys. So I think it's a shame, and I understand that he bears more of the burden, and he really is the only go-to guy for the Orlando Magic. I like Evan Fournier. Jonathan Isaac is still recovering. Mo Bamba is there. Terrence Ross, I like him, but DeMarcus Sabonis, he deserves more credit. He's an underrated player in the NBA, and I was a little bit disappointed to see that he didn't make it. Now, again, it's less egregious that he didn't make it versus Devin Booker. That's asinine, as I said. It's less egregious, but still slightly disappointing. And that's why this is always a topic of contention every single year, because there are always guys that are making legitimate cases to make the All-Star team. So, Morning Joe right here, J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, YouTube. Exciting show, a lot to talk about. Coming up, by the way, in just a couple minutes, I'm going to touch on Big Ben and the dilemma in Pittsburgh. He says he wants back in Pittsburgh. The Steelers are a little bit non-committal. I'm going to touch on that in about 10 minutes, so make sure to stick tuned for that. A lot in that developing story that I'm going to break down in just a moment. Speaking of a development story, Boogie-Cousins was announced to have been released, or is in the process of being released, by the Houston Rockets. And naturally, the Lakers came up as perhaps a team that would be interested in signing him. So should the Lakers sign DeMarcus Cousins? And the reason why this is such an interesting topic is because DeMarcus Cousins was part of the Lakers just last year, and he actually received a championship ring. The Lakers were really generous enough to have a ring made for him, despite not playing for the team at all. But apparently, there are reports that the Lakers right now are not interested in signing the big fella, despite their need and lack of size right now. And one of the reasons why, again, he was discussed is because they just waived Quinn Cook, who again is actually is likely to attract some different offers from teams that are looking for a veteran point guard to back them up. So they've created an additional roster space with waiving Quinn Cook. So they need another center. That's an obvious. They need someone to spell AD, and they need someone to be an improvement over Marc Gasol, who is having a terrible season. But this is why, to me, the Lakers should not pursue DeMarcus Cousins. Because what is the only thing that DeMarcus Cousins is going to be doing is being a slightly better version of Marc Gasol. That's it. That's all he's doing. Boogie-Cousins is averaging 9.7 points, about 6 assists. No, sorry, 7.5 rebounds. Apologies. But he's shooting 37% from the floor, 33% from three. All he is a glorified center who can shoot threes now, not even at a very high clip. The Lakers don't need that. Their issues aren't that they need another slow glacier big who can shoot a three at a slightly better clip than some of the guys that they have on the team, who's a below average 3-point shooter. Marc Gasol is averaging 4.5 points, 4 rebounds, and all he can do now is shoot a three. He can't even rebound the ball that effectively. So why would the Lakers want to bring in a guy who fills the same exact void and is still a defensive liability? Now, I agree that injuries have derailed and robbed DeMarcus Cousins of what, not only of hundreds of millions of dollars, but a tremendous career. At one point, we were talking about DeMarcus Cousins before Nikola Jokic, before Joel Embiid as the best center, the most versatile center in the NBA. And it's a shame that we've been deprived of his talents. I acknowledge that. But at this stage in his career, all he can do is step out and hit a three and occasionally hit an open jump shot. He can't defend. And while he has a lot of mass to him, he's not really the type of guy that's going to bang down low to guard the Nikola Jokic's and the Joel Embiids of the world. And that's who the Lakers need. They need someone who can defend the interior, who's athletic enough to be able to switch onto guards and contest shots and rebound the ball effectively. They do not need an offensive-minded center, a la Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee. The roles that they served last year were crucial to the Lakers' success. They were absolutely crucial because not only were they able to defend Nikola Jokic, they were able to switch out onto guards. They were aggressive. They were feisty. They contested shots. They're tall. They took up space in the lane, and they rebounded the ball extremely effectively. So for me, if the Lakers are trying to sign a center, the guy that they should be aiming for is Hassan Whiteside with the Sacramento Kings. That seems like an obvious play and a great pickup if he's ultimately bought out or released by the Sacramento Kings. Hassan Whiteside, I know he doesn't have eye-popping numbers right now, 8.5 points, about 7 rebounds per game, but this is a guy in Hassan Whiteside, or more like 6 rebounds per game, but for his career, 13 points, 11 rebounds. And the Lakers saw firsthand last year in the playoffs how much of a nuisance and defensive stalwart Hassan Whiteside was. In the postseason last year, he averaged 7 points, 7 rebounds, but 2 blocks per game, and drew numerous fouls on Dwight Howard, on JaVale McGee. He contested shots, and he's kind of a chip off the old block. Like this is a guy who talks trash, is willing to get up in your face, and he's a big guy. He's willing to bang down low with the Yusuf Nurkic's, again, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, and those are the types of guys that the Lakers need. And he would be a perfect fit with the Lakers because he provides something slightly different than Marc Gasol. He's a little bit faster. He can switch a little bit better. Again, I'm not saying he can switch like Anthony Davis, but he can spell Anthony Davis from time to time and provide that defensive intensity that the Lakers may only need for 15 minutes a game. So this seems like a great piece for the Lakers. And quite frankly, I mentioned JaVale McGee. JaVale McGee is another one of these individuals who could also be really beneficial to return to the Lakers. Not only does he contest shots really well, he runs the floor, he can roll to the basket on lobs and alley-oops, so he's athletic, and he understands the Lakers' personnel. He's familiar with the team and the coaching staff, so he would know what his role is right from the jump. So that's who I think the Lakers should target, but they shouldn't target DeMarcus Cousins. I hope he finds a home. He deserves to find a home. Again, it's unfortunate what's happened to what's happened in his career, but unfortunately, right now is not the time for the Lakers to be generous again and give this guy a shot on their team, because he does not serve the purpose or fill the void that they need filled at the moment. That's what I think. So transitioning to the Dallas Mavericks, they knocked off the Boston Celtics, who are on a major slump last night, 110-107. Luka Doncic with heroics once again. Dallas has been one of the most fascinating teams, both intriguing and entertaining, but also one of the most disappointing teams in the NBA this year. We had high expectations. We had heaped so much praise on Luka Doncic, and deservedly so, but we had all these lofty goals and expectations for the Dallas Mavericks entering this year. And they've quite frankly stunk up the joint. Right now, they're the 9th seed. They are 15-15 on the outside looking in. Now, granted, this isn't for a lack of productivity from Luka Doncic. He's been spectacular, 29 points, 9 rebounds, 9 assists. The guy, he's a walking triple-double. He's just a fantastic 6'9" Croatian wizard with the basketball. And so the bulk of the blame should not go to him, even though in several games this particular season he's come up a little smaller than we're accustomed to seeing. But I think the issue with the Dallas Mavericks and why it makes a win like this so tantalizing is because we've expected so much, and Porzingis has been out 12 games. Dorian Finney-Smith has been out 12 games. So they've never had a healthy roster to support Luka Doncic, and his supporting cast has never been enough. They've never been enough. And to be honest, the most underrated absence from this team and departure from this team is Seth Curry, who's been lighting it up in Philadelphia. And the Mavericks, I think one of the reasons why their offense was so prolific last year and why last year they had the number 1 offense in the history of the NBA was because of Seth Curry providing some more space for some of these other players to get open looks. Now they don't have him. Dorian Finney-Smith is a 3-and-D guy. Josh Richardson has not been that defense. He hasn't provided that defensive presence that they were expecting him to provide. He hasn't been that lockdown defender that they've been expecting from him. And so last night, Dallas nearly blew an 11-point lead at home with 3 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter. And it took Luka Doncic heroics, 2 incredibly difficult contested step-back threes, including one with 0.1 seconds left in the game, to secure the win for Dallas. Now, according to ESPN stats, there's only one other player in the last 25 years that has hit 2 go-ahead 3-point shots in the final 30 seconds of a game over the last 25 seasons. And the guy who Luka Doncic is in exclusive company with in this regard is Dan Dickau, who's a journeyman in the NBA, played for a number of teams, Portland, Boston, Houston, the New Orleans Hornets at the time. That's it. So his stats are off the charts. And that happened again in 2005. And Doncic, 31 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists. But the problem is this. Luka Doncic, prior to that shot, to those 2 shots last night, he was 2 for 7 on go-ahead shots in his career, including the playoffs last year. And that shot that he hit against the Celtics last night was pretty much the same exact shot in the same fashion that he knocked off the Clippers in Game 4 of that epic first-round playoff series in the bubble last year in overtime when he hit that step-back three to win it for win Game 4 in overtime. So the reason I bring up the stats is not to diminish what Luka Doncic has done, because it's really tough to make go-ahead shots in the NBA. But I bring that up because last night was the first time reaching 15-15 that Dallas has been 500 in a month. They've never been a 500 team at any stretch during the season except for the win last night, bringing them to 15-15. It took those heroics from Luka Doncic for the Dallas Mavericks to be a 500 team, to reach that benchmark. That's what it took to not make the playoffs, not win a series, to just reach a 500 mark. That's it. And that's incredibly discouraging and disappointing. And the Mavericks were on the brink of crumbling just a couple weeks ago. They had lost 6 straight games early in February, and now have finally started to find their rhythm. They've won 6 of their last 7, and Luka Doncic has led the NBA in scoring during that stretch. He's been averaging 34 points a game. He's had to be Superman, shooting over 52% from the floor, 48% from the three-point line. That's why he's been able to bump up his stats to a 35% three-point shooter this season. But while he's been ramping it up, while he's been stepping up, it just shows all this potential, all this stored potential with the Dallas Mavericks that we just haven't seen. And it's a shame. Well, I should say, I love seeing those highlights, but it's a shame that they're required for the Dallas Mavericks to just be a 500 level team. So once again, last night just highlighted the disappointment that we've had in the Dallas Mavericks because of the potential that we know exists within that locker room. That's my thoughts. Okay. Final topic, and then my Malkin's moments, which again, I'm going to try something new with my Malkin's moments. It's an interactive experience with the Malkin's moments this week. Again, I'm always trying to improve the show every single week. This is going to be fun. You are not going to want to miss this interactive experience on the Malkin's moments. So, first though, the Big Ben Pittsburgh Steelers dilemma ensues, right? Yesterday, it was reported out of the NFL Network that the Steelers want Big Ben to come back. Now, we know that Big Ben has wanted to return to Pittsburgh. But it's interesting that NFL Network would report that the Steelers want Big Ben to return when there have been multiple contradictory and suggestive reports that express the polar opposite. That Kevin-Colbert, the GM, isn't quite enamored and isn't super anxious to bring Big Ben back. Interesting how those reports get out. And Mark Stein, the agent for Big Ben Roethlisberger, said yesterday that his quarterback is happy to creatively adjust the contract to remain in Pittsburgh, and that the Steelers want to bring Big Ben back, and that they will reach out to him soon to address their cap situation. He says that the fire still burns strong. There's plenty of gas in the tank. Interesting, because the Steelers would have to owe Big Ben $41 million next year. And if they just release him, they'd have to eat $22 million in dead cap money. Now, both sides have acknowledged that they would need to restructure their deals or Big Ben's deal to make this work. At least they're on the same page with that. But this situation is almost eerily familiar to the Rams with Jared Goff. Now, Pittsburgh is entering this offseason $6 million over the cap space, over the cap. So they already have a limited amount of money that they could throw Big Ben. He would have to take a substantial haircut. I'm not just talking about going down from a full fro to a 4 on the sides. He'd have to go full army buzz if he wants to remain in Pittsburgh. Okay. And Kevin-Colbert, the GM of the Steelers, said last week in an eerily familiar, non-committal way, just like Les Snead and Sean McVay said about Jared Goff a couple weeks ago. This is what Kevin-Colbert said. As we sit here today, Big Ben is a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He has reiterated to us that he wants to continue to play. We told him we have to look at this current situation. Haven't we heard this tone before? Does that really sound like a guy who would be elated and excited to bring Big Ben back? Now, granted, it's a different situation with the Rams as it is with Big Ben and the Steelers. It's a different situation because the accomplishments of Big Ben and what he's meant to that organization are much greater and carry much more weight than Jared Goff being with the Rams for 4 seasons. But it's pretty clear what's going on here. Big Ben sees Tom Brady playing into his early 40s. He sees Drew Brees playing into his early 40s. He's 38. He desperately wants to continue to play, continue to be in the NFL, and continue to play for the only team that he's known and loved, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Steelers, clearly, in a distant and kind of aloof and evasive manner, are trying to strongly hint at any chance you might want to just retire and make this decision easier on us? Any chance you'd be willing to do that? So the problem is that the Steelers are indebted to Big Ben. This is a guy who has won 2 Super Bowls with the Steelers. He was drafted in 2003. He was the starter. He was drafted in 2003. He was the starter in 2004. And in 2005, he won his first Super Bowl in his second season as the starter, like Patrick Mahomes did. This is a guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. So they feel indebted to him. Now, not to the same degree as they do to Terry Bradshaw, but if you think about some of the greats, Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. So, unfortunately, if you're the Steelers, you have to look at the way that the Lakers handled the end of Kobe Bryant's career in a similar fashion. Now, I'm not saying that the Steelers haven't compensated Big Ben financially, just like the Lakers rewarded Kobe for all of his hard work and his services with that massive 2-year, $42 million deal in his final 2 years of the league. That was a debt of gratitude, a thank you, and demonstrated and sent a message to the rest of the NBA that the Lakers take care of their stars. Now, again, I'm not saying that the Pittsburgh Steelers don't take care of their all-time greats, because they do. And again, as I mentioned, they do compensate their stars well. They've compensated Big Ben financially. He's made over $250 million throughout his career in Pittsburgh. But what I am saying is that, unfortunately, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is one of those situations where you have to put your personal feelings aside. You have to put your personal aspirations for a future and for a younger and better quarterback on the side. You have to table that for another year and be willing to be hamstrung by an older veteran quarterback who deserves the right to finish his career in Pittsburgh. It's the right thing to do. I understand it's going to push your organization back by another year or two, but you're not high enough in the draft order to draft a good quarterback, so you'd have to make a trade anyway. This is a guy who belongs in Pittsburgh. I understand that it's not convenient for you if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't care. He deserves to end his career in Pittsburgh. And it's as simple as that. This is a guy, again, who's played 18 seasons for your franchise, 17 seasons as the starter, 5 AFC championship appearances, 3 Super Bowl appearances, 2 Super Bowl titles. Only 13 quarterbacks have ever accomplished that feat. Do the man good. Do the right thing. Sign him to 1 year, even if it's for $900,000, which I'm sure he'd be happy. He'd happily accept and bring him back for one more season. It's the right thing to do. Okay. So Malkin's moments. I got a great Malkin's moments for you. In fact, one interactive moment that's coming up. I've got a couple I'm going to list beforehand, but first, so Pau Gasol, the 6-time NBA All-Star and an 18-year NBA veteran, won 2 championships with the Lakers, a 6-time All-Star. He just signed a deal with Barcelona to return to play for Barcelona, the team the first professional European team that he ever played for. 1998 and 1999 season. He began his pro career in Barcelona, and it's just the perfect bookend and culmination to what's been a fantastic career for a really inspirational individual and a model citizen, not only in Europe and Spain, but in the United States. And he was the most revered teammate by Kobe. Kobe had the utmost respect in Pau Gasol. And what's really a nice story, again, this is a guy who's averaged 17 points, 9 rebounds for his 9 rebounds for his career. But what's ultra special is that the head coach right now of Barcelona is a man by the name of Sarunas Jasikevicius. Apologize, I'm sure I butchered that last name. But what's special about that is the head coach was actually a teammate of Pau Gasol's when they played together and won the Copa del Rey and won the European Basketball Championship in the 2001 season before he made the jump to the Memphis Grizzlies to the NBA. And what was special is that obviously Memphis and the Lakers engaged in that trade that sent his younger brother, Marc Gasol, who was drafted by the Lakers, to Memphis in exchange for his older brother, Pau, in 2008. We obviously know what happened after that. And he actually won the MVP in that season. Not to mention, last night, 36 years ago on the day, was the infamous chair toss by head coach Bobby Knight at Indiana. We can't forget about that. We cannot forget about that. And then Baltimore Ravens head football coach John Harbaugh secretly paid off a tip or paid off the bill at a restaurant in Baltimore last night at Jimmy's Seafood Restaurant. The tab was at least $2,000. He covered the tab for 7 families due to that are struggling right now. It was an incredible gesture by John Harbaugh. And this is the winningest head football coach in the Baltimore Ravens history. John Harbaugh doing this. Just an incredible gesture. And this was a charity event and a fundraiser that they were holding at this Jimmy's Seafood Restaurant. In fact, they've raised over $450,000 for COVID relief during this pandemic. So just a really nice gesture. But this is the Malkin's moment that I was most excited for. I'm going to try and share with you the highlight. Philandrius Fleming, a college basketball player at Charleston Southern, hit a walk-off overtime 3-point buzzer beater to beat Presbyterian yesterday. And I'm going to try and show you the clip right now. This is the first time I've ever attempted to do this on the History of Morning Joe. I hope it goes well. I'm not sure if it will, but take a look at this shot right here. And I started at the beginning. Here we go. How about that? How about that right there, huh? Excellent shot right there. Special moment. That's all the time that I got for today. Wow, this was a fun one. This was a fun one today. Thank you so much for joining me on a Wednesday morning. You've been watching and listening to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, Twitter at morning_Joe_. Okay, YouTube, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin. Make sure to subscribe, comment, review, like, all that jazz. Thank you so much for joining me. And as always, have a lovely rest of your